Hey guys, Andy here from Mediocre Hobbies, bringing you another showcase of a beautiful new product that has hit the market from Green Stuff World. That is their new dipping ink range. They very kindly sent me out half of the range to test out and review for this video, and I am so excited to get stuck in and see what they can do. If you're a supporter of my channel, you will know that I'm a big proprietor of contrast paint and army speed paints. That style of painting is definitely up my alley. It helps me get lots of miniatures done really fast and to a nice tabletop standard. So it's time to see if the new dipping inks from Green Stuff World are going to be added to my arsenal of paints for that process. So without further ado, let's get stuck into the video. Okay guys, so today is the day I finally got to play with Green Stuff World's new dipping inks. They sent this really handy brochure with the box, which is super cool for showing all the different shades over 3 different base coats. That was a super helpful thing to receive. And one of the things that I noticed was that on the inside, it shows you very clearly how dipping inks are supposed to work. Base coat, apply dipping inks, and then you need to layer the miniature. So unlike all the other YouTube videos on what dipping inks are, I'm going to go through the entire process. So I'm not going to just leave the dipping ink over a marine. I'm not going to get a marine and just paint it all orange or paint it all red, or I don't know what that would show you exactly, that the picture on the little brochure doesn't tell you already. So I'm going to show you guys how to paint a model from start to finish. Dipping inks will be part of the process, but then of course we'll use the other paints to finish it off. Green Stuff World very kindly sent me 12 bottles of dipping ink. As you can see, compared to a contrast pot, they are absolutely huge. They are more than 3 times the quantity of paint inside each bottle. And for paints like this, where you use a lot of it when you're using it, that is super handy to use. So I'm going to use this Ogroid Thaumaturge miniature to try out the dipping inks. And I'm just going to try a bunch of funky colors and see what happens. So I'm going to go for the acid green dip for his skin. I think by the end of this, he's going to look more like an orc than an Ogroid, but yeah, it was a lot of fun to do anyway. So I'm going to continue and see what happens. So already the dipping ink is applying really nicely, really smooth. Certain facts that I noticed whilst working with it were it has a much slower drying time than either the Army Painter's speed paints or the Games Workshop contrast paints. The benefit of this is it gives you more working time to maneuver the ink around the miniature, instead of having to worry about getting like a dry line and then coming around the opposite side and then hitting that line again, if that makes sense to you, and then them not quite blending together. So you basically get to put an entire coat of ink on the miniature and not have any weird dry spots or any streaking or anything like that. So it actually was a really kind of a lot more pleasurable to paint than I expected it to be. I expected it to be good, but once I started applying it like this, I just kind of realized how good it was. There was parts in it where I realized I'd let something pool and it was kind of like 2 or 3 minutes because, oh, that's going to be half dry and that's going to be horrible to scrape off, but the brush just took it off straight away. Really nice, really easily. As you can see, I got a nice strong green color with 1 coat of the dipping inks. I went in for the Black Shadow dip now. This wouldn't have been my one of choice. I wish I'd gotten some sort of dark brown dipping ink. I didn't get any really dark browns, which made this process a little bit awkward for all of the straps and belts and parts like that. But I followed through and I applied the dark one over the top. Glorious Magenta dip, great name, for an absolutely stellar ink. This one I think is my favorite dipping ink so far, so if you're only ever going to get yourself one dipping ink to try out, I suggest this one. I applied this onto his loincloth and the center of the shield as well. I went with the pink as well. These color choices are quite bizarre. I'm not sure whether I've done the model justice with the color choice, but like I said, I just wanted to try all these dipping inks out, so I was kind of going random colors in random areas just to see what would happen. And over the big flat surface on the shield, it applied just as well as the robe. Yeah, let the results speak for themselves. It does work really well. Papyrus ink dip is another one that I find really useful. I applied this to the hooves and all the horns and bits and pieces like that, the skulls on the shield. You may notice I forgot to film that bit, but we won't talk about that. I did the Elfwood brown, which I know you said I was looking for a dark brown, but this is actually a really light brown. I think this is the one, and they asked me what colors I wanted. I expected this one to be a much darker color. So live and learn. When I go and get the rest of them, I'm sure there'll be a dark brown in there. But I applied this to all of the fur and the mane and all the other bits and pieces of this guy. And I stuck with my normal kind of style, or at least I tried to, which was kind of paint the brightest bits first and the darker contrasts on after. Because if you make any mistakes with the lighter colors earlier, then you can cover that up with the darker ones and so on, so they can stack on top of each other really well. I said it before, I'll say it later on in this video, the whole idea that I don't actually own a lot of Green Stuff World paints. Their products, my shelves are booming with. I've got rollers and all sorts of other bits and pieces from them, but their paint range is something I don't have a lot of. I'd wish I had a selection of their paints to layer up over the dipping inks. I like to stick to one company's products when I'm doing it, but unfortunately I didn't have it, so I had to move on and use other paints to kind of get this miniature finished off and show you how I would work it. So I used brass for all the brass bits, silver for all the silver bits, and then after that I did the traditional thing that I like to do when using speed paints and contrast paints, is I then give the model an all over shade. It just helps to protect the paint underneath it, whether that be the contrast or the speed paints. I don't know yet the fragility of the inks. They definitely don't seem to rub off or scratch or anything like that really easily, but I wanted to basically give this thing a fair try in like my technique of painting. I will be doing some other things with it later on in the video, but for me, I just wanted to see what the final result would be if I was just treating this like I treat the other two types of paints that I have. So I'm going to go over the top now with Seraphim Sepia. This will shade the model beautifully, still leaving that rich green underneath, but adding that nice tint. The reason I went for something like a sepia is I did want to tint it a little bit, especially those straps that were kind of more grey than brown in my eyes. And then this was the result after the shade had dried. I also took that opportunity to give the model a quick base, and then it was time to just start layering it up. So I just mixed a bit of bone in with a bit of green to get a slightly lighter tone, and I quickly layered up the miniature, musculature, all that kind of bits, leaving all of the nice ink in all the recesses. Highlighted the horns on the miniature with a bit of bone, nothing too fancy. If you've watched any of my videos before, you'll know this is exactly how I paint pretty much everything. So it was nice to just give it a proper try. Layered up the pink. Once again, leaving that beautiful ink magenta in all the recesses. Just going for some of the kind of more raised areas with a little bit of a highlight. Tidying up any bits and pieces I might have made a mess of, which of course there was so few because I'm such a neat painter. And this was the final result of trying to paint an entire miniature using the dipping inks as all the base coats, which is what I use those paints for. And I must say I'm quite impressed and I'm really happy with the result. Okay, so that's what it's like to paint up an entire miniature using the dipping inks and with my normal technique. So I applied the dipping inks to give me all of my base coats. Then I shaded the miniature and then layered it up. Normally I would have layered up with the corresponding paints from the same manufacturer, so I would have preferred to use the Green Stuff World paint range to work up from the dipping inks. Unfortunately, I actually do not have a collection of Green Stuff World standard paints just yet. The only thing I have is their dipping inks they sent me and one of their intensity ink sets. So I will need to add some Green Stuff World paints to my collection sometime soon. The next thing that I wanted to do is to use it as an accent for other paintings. So I've got a big squig miniature. I already know how I'm going to do the squig's skin to match in with the rest of my Gloomspite Gitz army, but I thought I would test out the dipping inks to work on the colossal squig's mouth. So those beautiful pink gums and the razor sharp teeth. I think the dipping inks are going to be perfect for laying down the base coats for these areas. So I'm going to do that and let's see what it looks like. Okay, so this is an idea I had, which was to basically accent other painting styles using the dipping. So if you don't want to use it as the kind of the backbone of the painting, how to use it to help you out. So for this big brute here, I wanted to use the dipping inks to paint in his mouth. So I wanted to play around with that magenta ink a little bit more. And I was going to really test it to its limits here. So I got a rough brush, the magenta ink, and I literally attacked the mouth of this big brute. So all of the gums all around the teeth, and then I had to get the brush in around the tongue, back of the mouth, the roof of the mouth, all those bits and pieces, which is really difficult to get in with like normal paints. So the more watery paints, the contrast, the speed paints, that kind of thing, that's what you want to use, at least personally I want to use. And this paint did an absolutely stellar job of this. I literally just, like I said earlier, attacked the inside of the mouth with it, and it didn't pool, it didn't streak, it didn't leave any weird patches. It just looked like a beautiful, like bright pink mouth. While I was going through, I knew I was going to do the skin on this miniature. I'm using my traditional skin method, so it matched in my army. But I did have a little play around with some other colors and used that as a big canvas just to throw some other speed paints on. So don't judge the miniature when it goes to the next step. I used some papyrus for the teeth. As you can see, I just wanted to play around with a few bits and pieces. I was quite happy with how that result actually turned out. It was a very interesting thing, and half of me really wanted to just go from here. But I decided that I would just continue on and go for my normal orange route. So the papyrus was used to base coat all of the teeth. Like I said, it flowed really nice. It didn't tint or stain any of the pink. It just gave me that perfect base coat for bone. This miniature also has a bunch of like skulls stuck in its gob and stuck in its teeth and stuff, so it was really handy to base coat them with this as well. Really quick and simple. Obviously, while I was waiting for those to dry, I went on and started the orange process. But all I did after that was quickly layered up the ink with some brighter color. So I went in for a brighter pink and just highlighted up those gums. There was no shading, no washing, no nothing. This is straight from dipping ink to just a light layer job. And it makes the mouth pop beautifully. I was so happy with it. It's a real beautiful focal point of this miniature, and it's obviously going to push me to make sure I get the rest of the miniature finished painted. Might be what I do this evening, yeah, what can I say more? I'm actually just gobsmacked by the magenta as a whole. So there was the mouth, all of the pink. As you can see, I highlighted the tongue a little bit, left the rest of the mouth nice and dark, but it still had that rich pink to it, like it was in shadow. Grabbed a bone color and quickly layered up the teeth. Nothing special here, just leaving that dark papyrus near the top and the gums. And then feathering down with the teeth to add that bright, vibrant color to it. Give him his nice, beautiful gnashers. What more do you need to munch your way through the enemy? And there we have the gob of this squig all done. Like I said, I think for the 4 paints used, 2 dipping inks and 2 layer paints, I think that's a stellar result. This thing wouldn't really fit on my rotatey thingy, so I just did it by hand. Hopefully no one notices the shoddy job of rotating it, or hear me saying what I just did there. But anyway, delighted with this result. I have to say I'm quite impressed with how the mouth turned out. It definitely has that vicious maw look to it, and something that I wouldn't in no way, shape or form be embarrassed about putting on the table. It is it's a pretty cool piece, and it's going to sit in pride of place in my Guns by Gitz army. The last thing that I'm curious about, and I'm going to do now, is to see how dipping inks stack on top of dipping inks. So we all know there's a bit of controversy in the community around another paint brand and their reactivation issues. And when I did the review for those particular paints, I didn't actually have any issues, so I struggled to relate to people that were having problems. And I'm not saying that there wasn't issues, I'm just saying that I didn't experience them myself. So I'm going to now see for you guys if that issue exists, and I'm going to hit some bases with the same dipping ink 3 times. So I'm going to layer it up for 3 times. Not only do I want to see if it reactivates, I want to see how strong the color gets, and to see what result it will have. So let's see what happens. Okay, so this is going to be a super quick. Once again, I'm going with the pink. I'm going to go for 3 coats of paint with pink and 3 coats of paint with the orange to see what the effect is with each new layer. Does it cause any tearing? Does it cause any reactivation and smudging? Does it do any of those things that I think people will want to know when it comes to using or buying these dipping inks? So this is coat number 1 of the magenta. Wanted to get a nice clean coat. I just did these textured bases because I wanted you guys to see it clearly. I think if we were to see any tearing or any smudging or anything, it would be a lot easier to see it on a surface like this. So there's coat 1 dry. You can see the white shows through a little bit. It's not the strongest pink in the world after this. But as you can see, I applied a thick 2nd coat. I can't see any reactivation whatsoever. And as you can see, it does definitely change the color of the pink, adding it vibrancy, a lot more depth to the color. Is that because it's just wet, or because we just applied it? But then this is coat number 3, and as you can see, it is definitely getting more vibrant and more bright with absolutely no reactivation issues. So the pink is quite a strong color, so I wanted to try this as well on one of the colors which has a little bit less, I don't know whether pigment is the right word, but it's definitely a lighter color. So I'm going to go with the orange paint, which wasn't as like vividly orange as I was expecting it to be. Orange being my favorite color. The orange colors in every range are super important to me. So I wanted to see whether if I just added more layers, it would become an orange that I could see myself using a lot more. So this is it after coat 1. And as you can see, it kind of just looks like a sepia wash was applied over the top of it. It has a tint of orange, but it doesn't scream orange to me. As you can see, I applied the second coat. And as you can see, it is already very clearly now an orange color. It works beautifully. Like I said, it takes that little bit longer to dry, which means I can just pull it into the right areas, make sure it's not pooling or sitting anywhere weird or making it look horrible. And then after the second coat dried, definitely much more orange. And let's go in for a solid third coat of orange across this base. And once again, with each concurrent layer, it just becomes like a richer, darker orange paint. Like I said earlier in the video, this is something that for sure will become extremely useful because it doesn't reactivate. You can apply like coat after coat to get much darker, richer tones, or what happens if you put the orange over the pink or the pink over the blue or the white. There's definitely loads of mixing options in here, which is going to change the game. Here it is after the 3 layers have dried on both bases. As you can see, they're both beautifully smooth, beautifully strong, and I cannot wait to play with the rest of the color. Okay, absolutely no reactivation issues there. The dipping ink stacked on top of dipping ink beautifully. The color did get deeper and more vibrant, and the fact that you can layer them on top of each other opens up endless possibilities for combinations of dipping inks on top of dipping inks, or deepening the tone by adding multiple layers of the same color. So I'm quite impressed with these paints, and I'm definitely going to be using them moving forward. Okay guys, that brings my review of the Green Stuff World dipping inks to a close. I'm delighted with them. Like I said, Green Stuff World very kindly sent me out the first 12 in the set, and there are 24 colors, so I've been sent half. I will be picking up the other 12 pretty much as soon as possible so I can have a good play around with those. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, make sure that you hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already done so. It would mean a lot to me and help the growth of the channel on my crazy year venture to become full-time on social media. If you have any questions about anything that I did on this video, make sure you drop in the comments below and I'll get back to each and every one of you guys. And if you want to follow me on any one of my other socials, there are links to things like my Instagram, Discord, and of course my new podcast in the links below. I also stream on Twitch twice a week, every Tuesday and Thursday, so look out for details on those as well. Thank you guys so much for watching the video, and I'll see you in the next one.